The following lesson is linked to Learning Outcome 2, Reading and Viewing. It addresses the assessment standard that requires learners to explore and explain key features of texts and how they contribute to meaning. Learners should be able to recognize how word choices, imagery, and sound devices affect mood, meaning, and theme.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. Our series of lessons is called Studying Poems, and we have already looked at many things that will increase your success when analysing poetry. In this lesson, I want to particularly look at love poems to show you how poets express the more tender emotions we all feel. Here is a poem that deals with very recognisable emotions. Sometimes with One I Love by Walt Whitman. Sometimes with one I love, I fill myself with rage for fear I effuse unreturned love. But now I think there is no unreturned love. The pay is certain, one way or another. I loved a certain person ardently, and my love was not returned. Yet out of that I have written these songs. Now this is a rather strange love poem. In it, Whitman talks about the fear that we all experience when we first fall in love with someone, that our love will not be returned. At the end of the poem, he comments, though, that even though you are not loved back, you always get something out of loving someone. In his case, he loved someone and his love was not returned, but he got the inspiration to write this poem out of that experience. Now let's discuss how meaning was conveyed in this poem. He first mentions what is perhaps one of our biggest fears when we love someone, that we will pour out love that will not be returned. But then Whitman gives us the message that there is no unreturned love. In other words, he is saying that you will always get something out of loving, and that in one way or another, we all benefit from it. Then he explains his reasoning to us, saying that he loved someone, and even though she did not return his love, that love inspired him. Certainly this poem has an unusual content or focus, but do you see how clearly and directly the emotions are stated? Whitman tells us what he thinks the truth is in a very communicative way. Now let's take a look at a poem that uses more formal language. And the subject is not what you would think either. While we read this poem, see if you can figure out who or what William Wordsworth is declaring his love for. On Westminster Bridge. Earth has not anything to show more fair. Dull would he be of soul who could pass by a sight so touching in its majesty. This city now doth, like a garment, wear the beauty of the morning, silent, bare. Ships, towers, domes, theatres, and temples lie open onto the fields and to the sky, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Never did the sun more beautifully steep in his first splendour, valley, rock, or hill. Ne'er saw I, never felt, a calm so deep. The river glideth at his own sweet will. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty heart is lying still. In our series of lessons called Getting into Poetry, we studied the structure of sonnets. This is an example of a sonnet. It has 14 lines. But unlike the Shakespearean sonnet that we looked at in Lesson 4, this sonnet is an example of the Petrarchian or Italian sonnet. We say this because the poet uses this particular form and structure. The poem is divided into two sections, an octave and assessed it. As we are dealing with how emotion is conveyed in this lesson, we will not look at the structure of this poem in detail, but instead we will look at the style of the poem. I'm sure that you have noticed the formal or elevated language that was used. Look at the word order. Dull would he be of soul. And words like garment and splendor, as well as the description that praise the object of affection. I'm sure that you have also worked out that Wordsworth is not expressing his love for a woman, but for a city. The title kind of gives it away. The title explains that he is standing on Westminster Bridge in London and describing what he sees. So while this poem has all the elements expected of a love poem, the elevated language, the deep, well-expressed emotion, the poet is writing about something quite unusual, his love for a city. Now, I would like to revisit a poem that we used an extract from in a previous lesson. This is a famous love poem. You might have heard this read at weddings, and it has even been used for a perfume ad. How Do I Love Thee by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the length and breadth and height my soul can reach. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need, by sun and candlelight. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life, and if God choose, I shall love thee better after death. What a beautiful love poem. The emotions that the poet expresses are sincere and moving. Let's look at the poem again. She expresses the extent of her love when she says, "The length and breadth and height my soul can reach." And the essential part this love plays in her everyday existence, here, every day's most quiet need. And finally, she expresses the hope that this love will continue forever. I shall love thee better after death. Although this is a wonderful example of a love poem, not all love poems use elevated or formal language or complicated images. Some love poems are far simpler, and their beauty lies in their simplicity. To encourage you to write your own love poems, I want to show you an example of a South African love poem.
My heart coth little bit, minute I touch for you. This here and that there. Oh, my mostest beautifulest. Oh, my sweetest dear lovely. How now you feel.
The language used in this poem is most interesting. Sapamla writes in a kind of local dialect. Oh, my mostest beautifulest. The point is that you do not have to use sophisticated or elevated language to write your own love poem. Join me again for our next lesson. Bye-bye.